Hello and welcome back to Twinstrology. I'm Marla, and here on my channel we talk about twin flames, astrology, and the ascension process. And today we're going to talk about the eclipses that are coming up, but more importantly, we're going to be talking about a 9-year cycle that is getting activated at these eclipses. It's going to be with us all year, and it's creating some big changes for twin flames. And so, you might want to stop this video right here and go and grab a pen and a piece of paper so that you can jot down some dates. And then after you watch this, you might want to think about those dates and if they had any relevance to you so that you might know even more how this cycle might be affecting you. So the 9-year cycle that's coming to an end involves 3 planetary bodies. Now, I'm using the term planetary bodies loosely because it involves Saturn, the North and South Node, and asteroid union. So technically the nodes are not a planetary body. They're a calculated point, and you could count them as 1 or 2. And then asteroid union is considered a smaller asteroid. So technically probably wouldn't fall under planetary body. But like I said, just for ease of discussion, we're going to use those terms today. And those three or four bodies have been periodically meeting up and creating activations. And we're going to talk about this cycle today and how it's been affecting twin flames. And the first thing we have to do is go back to the beginning of this cycle. And it really started in 2012, because what happened in 2012 was the North Node went into the sign of Scorpio on August 31st. Now, this was an important shift, and a lot of twins met each other in 2012, especially in the fall of 2012, and that's because of this transit of the North Node going into Scorpio. You may have heard me discuss before that I feel Scorpio best represents the sign that would govern twin flames, because not only does Scorpio represent merging with a soulmate, but it also represents the phoenix. And when you are on the twin flame journey, you are burning away all the old energy so that you can rise up out of your own ashes and ascend. So that's why I feel Scorpio is important, but it cannot be argued that many twins came together or met, got connected somehow in 2012. And this went into the beginning of 2013. Now, also at this time, we had Saturn also entering Scorpio, and that took place on October 6, 2012. So shortly after the North Node went into Scorpio. I remember this time vividly. For one thing, like within days of Saturn moving into Scorpio, my mother unexpectedly passed away. And of course, Scorpio is the sign that represents death. And whenever we have planets making an entrance into Scorpio, we tend to have a lot of people crossing over. So with the North Node and Saturn both in Scorpio, that was happening. Of course, they were at different ends of Scorpio because the nodes go backwards. So Saturn would have been at the beginning of Scorpio while the nodes were at the end of Scorpio. But still, it was a very powerful time. And that energy was creating that activation that led up to the 12-21-12 gateway that really marked the ascension process. Like, that is the date that most people consider the big event, I guess. I mean, people still talk about the event, but that was at least a big event. So that event, it took place at the very end of the year, right? 12/21 is the winter solstice, and it's only like what, days away from the following year. So even though 2012 was kind of when this started, it went into 2013, and there were still twins meeting each other a lot at the beginning of 2013. And you know, even if you didn't meet your twin at this time, you may have been doing something that kind of activated something that was bringing them in, or, you know, we're going to talk about later dates as well. So, you know, some of this will still pertain to you. But you know what, let me stop a minute here too, as we're talking about this cycle and kind of the ascension cycle and how this plays into the bigger ascension cycle. Chiron, if any of you listen to Chiron, talks about the ascension being a 36-year cycle, and that 2012, the winter solstice of 2012, marked the halfway point. So that would mean that the 36-year cycle started in 1994 and it's going to 2013. Okay, now I don't believe that Chiron ever mentioned the precession of the nodal axis when he talks about this 36-year cycle, but that nodal precession is very close to that. It goes a little bit over, because remember, the nodal precession is 18.6 years. So it's not an exact 18-year cycle, but from 1994 to 2012 was an 18-year cycle. And then from 2012 to 2030 is another 18-year cycle. And we are now halfway through that cycle, because we're 9 years from 2013, but remember, the activation happened at the very end of 2012. Okay, so, you know, I tend to really, I'm very interested in the fact that Chiron mentions this 36-year cycle, because it so strongly connects to what the nodes were doing. So yeah, in 2012, we had the North Node in Scorpio. That means the South Node was in Taurus. And what do we have now? Now the South Node is in Scorpio and the North Node is in Taurus. So we're halfway through the nodal precession, and now they are reversed from where they were in 2012. And now there is an approximately 6-year gap between the convergence of these planetary bodies. Okay, so there's not, after this year, these three bodies are not going to meet up with each other until 2028, apart from a kind of small in conjunction that's going to happen in 2025. But I don't feel the in conjunction will be as powerful as the ones that I'm talking about, which are primarily the oppositions and the squares that have occurred. I really don't, when I'm reading astrology, to me, I always put the most weight on the squares and oppositions, and less weight on the trines and sextiles. So I haven't really focused on those energies here. And the reason why this convergence is important is because it creates karmic shifts and allows us to do timeline jumping. We think about the nodes, right? The nodes have to do with our soul's journey. the nodes are very much an emblem of our multidimensionality. And anytime the nodes are activated, it's activating our multidimensionality. Then we have Saturn. What does Saturn represent? Manifesting something, materializing something. It's cardinal Earth. So it's actually, yeah, bringing something and making it material. But you have to go through your Saturn lessons before you can manifest or materialize that, because Saturn wants to make sure that you're ready. And that's certainly what's been happening over these last 9 years, is we've been doing our Saturn lessons. Saturn also represents karma. And as I've already talked about, 2022, there's a big shift happening in regards to karma, because we're moving away from having to play out our karmic cycles and moving into sovereignty and being able to become the creator of our reality, rather than having to continue to face these cycles. We can shift that timeline and we can be done with that cycle now. Saturn also rules time and timing as well. And so the nodes also affect timing, because it deals with our timelines, our multidimensionality. So that's an important feature as well. And then union, as I said, it's an asteroid. The asteroids are only, relatively recently known, and there's thousands of them. I think there's about 25,000 now, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but there's a lot. It's in the thousands. So you can look at asteroids as, I kind of liken them to tarot cards, and you can assign them whatever meaning you want to give them. Of course, you want it to have something to do with what the asteroid is somewhat named after, right? So with union, I normally look at union as representing twin flame unions, but it also represents union with our higher self, and also union with all that is. And like I said earlier, I think you can't really separate those things. They all go together, because in order to create union with your twin flame, you have to embody your higher self, or at least you're in the process of embodying your higher self. And then when you do that, you understand what oneness really truly means. So those bodies came together in 2013, the spring of 2013. Yes. And they were triggered in 2013 by the series of eclipses that we had that year. And there were 3 of them. So the first convergence that took place happened on April 25th, 2013, where we had a lunar eclipse in Scorpio, which is what we're going to have again in 2 weeks on the 16th of May. Now, they were still a little bit separated at that time. The actual eclipse occurred at 6 degrees, and Saturn was at 9 degrees Scorpio. It was a lunar eclipse, so the moon would have been in Scorpio. Union was at 5 degrees Taurus, so union was actually on the south node, and then the north node was at 17 degrees Scorpio, south node was at 17 degrees Scorpio. So when I say they were a little bit separated, right, union was still at the beginning of Taurus while the nodes were in the middle here, but union was opposing Saturn, and the eclipse was activating that whole those whole signs. Okay, so that is why I'm counting it on that date. A lot of times I don't give a lot of weight to orbs because we're talking about an activation and we don't always need to get so specific. But yeah, they were certainly close enough to be felt. And so this is one of the dates that you might want to keep in mind, April 25th, 2013, because something might have occurred, especially in regards to your twin on that date. Then 2 weeks later, we had a solar eclipse at 20 degrees of Taurus, and that was on May 9th. And that eclipse also had Saturn opposing Mars. And Mars does often figure into these configurations. And Mars and Saturn is a whole nother thing, because again, it goes back to Saturn lessons, and Mars is the things that we want. And when Mars is an aspect to Saturn, it's like, well, you may want that, but you're not going to get it right now. You're going to have to wait. You're going to have to be patient for it. And so that was happening as well. And then on May 24th, there was another lunar eclipse, and this one was at 4 degrees Sagittarius. Okay, and a lot of twins that connected with each other in 2012 then found themselves either in some kind of separation or kind of falling out of the bubble love phase at these eclipse cycles in 2013. So it could be, you know, any time in the spring something could have happened, because eclipses are really their effect is a lot longer than a normal new moon or full moon. And it's, some of them are, you know, you have the energy, right? And eclipses happen every 6 months. So you have those eclipses in effect for 6 months, but then you also have them in effect for years, depending on the strength of the eclipse. But I won't go into that and bore you guys. But that 2013 was important as the beginning of this cycle. And then it moved into 2016. There was another big alignment. Remember, I'm talking mainly about the oppositions and the squares. And that's kind of like how the cycle works. Every 3 years, they're aligning again. So at that time in 2016, the North Node was in Virgo and the South Node was in Pisces, and Saturn was conjunct Union in Sagittarius. So Saturn and Union were squaring the nodes. They were traveling together, Saturn and Union, and they were making a square to the nodal axis. Now, there was an eclipse as well in 2016 that was affecting that convergence. So there was one on, and I'm not going to go into each one, but I'm going to mention two. The first one was March 8th, and that was a solar eclipse in Pisces, and that was squaring Saturn and Union. And then there was one on September 1st, 2016, that was a solar eclipse in Virgo. And this one was very tight because the sun and the moon were at 10 degrees Virgo. The North Node was at 13 degrees Virgo, and Saturn and Union were at 11 and 10 degrees Sagittarius. And Mars was at 15 degrees Sagittarius. So here we had Mars conjunct Saturn, where in the first convergence, they were opposing each other. Okay. And again, it was like the universe applied some brakes. So, you know, depending on when you met your twin, there may have been something happening in 2016. You could have actually met your twin at that time. That would be something that would be aligned with this, but also maybe like there was another separation or something else if you especially met your twin in the 2012s, 2013s, or 2014s. And the big thing that happened in 2016, besides that convergence, was that Mars went retrograde. And he went retrograde in Sagittarius back into Scorpio, and he transited over Saturn in union 3 times. So yeah, we could consider that like a big break was applied to twin flame unions. And then in 2019, again, we had some interesting formations. We had Saturn conjunct the South Node in Capricorn. And at the beginning of August, or in mid-August, this was making a trine to Union, which was in Virgo. But then in October, it moved into a square when asteroid Union moved into Libra. So in October into November, we had Saturn conjunct the South Node, square Union. This really had a trigger on October 27th, 2019, with a Scorpio new moon, in which, oh gosh, did I not write down the moon? I don't think I wrote down the degrees of the moon, but Saturn was at 16 degrees Capricorn, the South Node was at 11 degrees Capricorn, and Union was at 10 degrees Libra, and Mars was at 15 degrees Libra. So again, you see Mars and Saturn, or we see Saturn, I should say, applying the brake with Mars. So again, something could have came up in 2019 sometime that was like, nope, you haven't completed the Saturn lesson. You're going to have to wait for that. So that brings us up to this eclipse series, I should say. Because once again, the eclipses are what they represent is a new moon and a full moon that is within a certain degree of the nodal axis, then we're back to having the eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio. Only this time the North Node, remember, is in Taurus. But you know what? Maybe before I talk about the eclipses, because I'm going to go into this eclipse, let's talk a little bit more about what this alignment or this convergence has brought for us, right? Because I talked a lot about it representing union and our ascension process. So for twin flames, this cycle really represents the journey back to our twin. Now, if you met your twin in 2012 or even 2013, then you know that back then the twin flame journey is not like it is today. There were very few people talking about twin flames. Maybe a handful of people on YouTube talking about twin flames. I can think of like Gold Ray twin flames and Lindy Cowling being the ones that I found first. And there were a couple of other people that were more like healers. I think one's name was Leora. You guys might remember her. I think she passed away. And yeah, Mel of Gold Ray Twin Flames has passed away as well. But it was not like today where almost every single tarot reader, or I won't say spiritual people, because there's a lot of spiritual people that don't even believe in twin flames, but you know, in general, in the spiritual community, there's a lot of people talking about twin flames. You know, it's just, it's kind of ubiquitous now. It's become a term that is really been kind of branded into our vocabulary. But yeah, back in 2012, it wasn't like that at all. And those of us that met our twins back then, because there was very limited information, we didn't really know what we were doing. We were just winging it. And the energies, you know, I remember like the ups and downs within the energies that were happening, especially in 2013 and 2014. We had that Pluto Uranus square. Some of you might remember that was very, very activating. So a lot of people went into dark nights of the soul at that time, especially around the eclipses of 2013. Now there were eclipses in October, November-ish of 2013 as well, but you know, I can't speak about every single date or we would be here for a very long time, but those would be relevant to you as well. So yeah, dark night of the soul, very dark times. But if you look back now, think about how far you've come. Even if you met your twin later, even if you met your twin like in 2015, 2016, you guys have come a long way. But with this 9-year cycle ending, a lot of us are graduating. We're graduating into mystics. And with the convergence of these energies now in 2022, what we're looking to do is embody more of our higher self. And that is going to make way for unions because, as we've talked about in other videos, we are now making that transition where we don't need to play out our karmic cycles over and over, but we are becoming the creators of our reality. And with this eclipse right now in Taurus that's happening in just a couple days, April 30th, this is a choice point. Do you want to become the creator of your reality, or do you want to stay, you know, living out the karmic cycle? And there's no judgment on whatever you decide to do. That's purely up to you. And there'll be other choice points where you'll be able to decide whether you're ready to take up the mantle of creator. But you know, I was thinking back on how in 2020, remember, we were all as light workers taking this oath of sovereignty. And that was activating this, that was calling this in, because what we're doing when we become the creators of our reality is we're becoming sovereign. We're becoming sovereign from the karmic cycle, and we're taking back control of our life. So I assume that many of you are going to be ready for this, and it's going to be okay because we're going to have some training wheels on as we learn to navigate through this energy. But we needed to activate the codes within ourselves for sacred union as well. And these convergences have been activating codes. And, you know, we have been reaching, many of us reached inner sacred union. And that's also making way for these changes because we're in a much more balanced state. Like if you're not balanced in your energy, there's no point even becoming the creator of your reality because you're going to have a really hard time manifesting anything from an imbalanced or a negative energy. So, yeah, embodiment is going to become stronger. And I'm not going to say that. But truly, this cycle has taught us about it being a journey more than a destination, because we are the creators of union. The whole point of being on this journey at this time is because the twin flame dynamic leads us perfectly to become the creators of our reality, because we are meant to manifest our counterpart and manifest union with them. And you have done that. Like, I know that I manifested my counterpart, and I know that it started that I unconsciously made an activation a year before he even showed up in my life. So I know that I manifested him into my life. And my guides have always told me that you're going to manifest union. I hope you don't hear my stomach grumbling, especially because I have a microphone on today. Sorry, guys. It's past my lunchtime. Yeah, you have to manifest union. That's why the shift is important. And in one of my other videos, I think the last tarot card reading that I did for unions, I talked about it's time now in 2022 for the divine masculine to start taking action. But that's happening because the divine feminine is calling them into action, because the divine feminine's energy is saying, I'm ready. I'm ready now to become the creator. Now you can move. Now you can take action. And the divine masculine has been waiting for that. You know, I made some jokes in my other video that, you know, it's not just because your twin is just messed up, you know, but there's also a collective energy that we're all playing into as well. And it will be interesting to see how we, when we shift into creators, how that collective energy reflects us. But remember, we're all always one. So even though we're all creating our own reality, just naturally, because we're all one, we also create a collective reality, or our individuals' realities join up with each other's at certain points. But yeah, in order to become this manifester, we had to go through a lot of Saturn lessons. And there were some really hard lessons in there, not gonna lie. And we had to integrate a lot of past life energy as well, and break away of those patterns and be prepared to not only embody our higher self, but embody the goddess energy and anchor that goddess energy into Gaia again. Maybe I should say reactivate it, bring it alive again, and bring it into balance with the divine masculine energy. So all of this was creating that perfect foundation for unions through self-evolution. And that's, you know, really how we would sum this up, is we were creating the perfect foundations. Okay, so now back to the eclipse. And yeah, I guess I'll talk about both eclipses. I have the charts here, but I wasn't really prepared to talk about the second eclipse. But once I looked at the chart again, I thought I probably should. Taurus new moon solar eclipse, and the day before Pluto goes retrograde. The eclipse is on Saturday, April 30th, as I said, and it's taking place at 10 degrees of Taurus. So this eclipse is a new moon eclipse, and that's why I feel like it's a new beginning, even though, like, you know, it feels like we've already had kind of several new beginnings, but it feels like more timelines are being anchored at this eclipse. And now what's going on with the convergence is the nodes are at 22 degrees Taurus, and then we have union at 21, Vesta at 22, and Saturn at 24 degrees Aquarius, squaring the nodes. So even though, once again, the eclipse is not in that exact orb with the other planets that I'm talking about, it's still activating that energy, and it's setting us up for how this is going to play out for us this year. And so maybe we can look at that new beginning as just that, how this energy is going to form up for us. So with Vesta there, basically sandwiched between Union and Saturn, okay, Vesta is the asteroid that represents twin flames. She is the flame. She's represented by a flame. She's the goddess of the hearth and the sacred fire. And heart activations are entirely possible, but it's just confirming for me that there's a major activation happening with this energy for twin flames, and you know, something is being ignited here by Vesta being part of this. So another interesting thing about this eclipse is it's on Beltane. Beltane is the union of the god and goddess, the time of year where we celebrate that. We call it May Day as well, but it actually starts on April 30th and goes into May 1st. So to have this eclipse on that day is yet another sign for us that there is some kind of transformation going on. In addition, there's this other sign, and that is Chiron. Now, at the time of the eclipse, Chiron moves right onto the 14th degree, but just prior to the eclipse, Chiron is on and has been on probably for at least several weeks, at least 2 weeks. Chiron has been on the 13th degree of Aries, and the Sabian symbol for that degree is a serpent coiled near a man and a woman, which is the Sabian symbol that represents twin flame unions, and, you know, harkens back to Adam and Eve and the serpent and eating the apple, which brought us divine knowledge. It also has to do with Kundalini. So some of you might be experiencing Kundalini activations or have been just prior to this eclipse. What we really need to do around this eclipse is really focus on dropping our old stories, okay? Because we can't move into the next stage. We can't create union from our old stories. So we have to move past those. Another thing that's been coming up a lot and that I've been talking about previously to this video is faith is a big issue. And there were some activations happening where many twins were having their faith tested. And that's because if you've chosen to move into the creator cycle, then you have to have faith in order to manifest anything. You have to have faith that you can have it and that you're going to get it. And twin flame union is no exception. So you have to know in your heart 100% that you are going to be with that person. In fact, you even need to know it so well that you feel that it already exists. And what do we always say about twin flames? We're one. We are one. We're always one. And so to have faith in this means that we know we are one and that we exist as one. It's already happened. It's already done. And there's no need to question it anymore. But you know, there can still be triggers because that having faith is something that you have to work on it becoming steady. And again, think back. Some of you think back all the way to 2012. Where was your faith at in 2012? Or maybe I should say in 2013, after those eclipses, where something might have gone down and you might have gotten pulled out of the bubble phase, then your faith might have really come into question. But now all these years later, are you still having issues around faith on like a regular basis? You know, that's something that you're going to need to look at, because it's time for us just to relax on this journey. And the more that we embody our higher selves, the more we're able to just relax and trust the process. Remember what I said earlier. This convergence is about recognizing that the journey is as important as the destination, and everything that we've learned and all the ways that we've grown. It was all about our own process. Although the twin is definitely something that keeps you on track, it doesn't really let you slack off the journey for too long. But ultimately, you have to bring it back to you, an inner union, so that you can manifest it externally. Has within, so without. Everything in your reality is nothing but an external mirroring of what you are. I've been reading a lot of Neville Goddard, and what does he say? You don't manifest what you want, you manifest what you are. So what's being reflected to you can only be what you have inside of you. So that's why we needed to go through these lessons, why we needed to activate inner union and keep that inner union in mind, because you have to be in that state of trust and faith and peace and knowingness in order to manifest it externally. Now, the eclipses also conjunct Uranus, and Uranus is on the Sabian symbol, a man with a silk hat, muffled against the cold braves of storm. And in my last astrology video, I talked about Chiron being on that degree about a bomb, which is hidden from view, failed to go off. But I talked about how the eclipses might activate some kind of trigger, what we could call a bomb. I don't even like to say that word really, because we don't, our words manifest. But what I mean by that is it could be a surprise. Like really, these eclipses that we have right now, they're like wild cards. Like anything can happen, especially with this one conjunct Uranus. But the other one's not going to be that far In fact, the other one will be an orb of Uranus as well. So, yeah, I mean, Uranus is the unexpected, the tower. So, the tower doesn't necessarily have to be something bad, but um, definitely we could say, go ahead and expect the unexpected at this time. But this Sabian, which talks about a storm, too, it could be something that creates some turbulence in your life. And for those of you that are still in karmic relationships, or if your divine masculine is in a karmic relationship, then definitely at this time, anything can be triggered around those situations. As I've said before, karmic relationships are on borrowed time now because we're stepping out of the karmic cycle. So there's no reason to hold on to those relationships anymore. Again, it's a choice, but if you are choosing to move on to creator, then your twin is going to move on to creator because they're a reflection of you. And I'm being shown that these karmic relationships, they're breaking down, and these eclipses will be some kind of pivotal point in that for a lot of people. Maybe it doesn't mean that the complete collapse happens, but there could definitely be some kind of like, whoa, wake up, wake up and see the reality of this connection, or people just being like, I've had enough, I can't take anymore. That kind of energy can happen. And we have this other configuration with Mercury opposing asteroid Karma and squaring Juno. And Juno is at 3 degrees and 33 minutes of Pisces. So yet another kind of, little sign for us. But what I heard when I saw that in the chart was words need to be spoken. Okay, now that could be between all different types of people. Probably going to be a romantic relationship with Juno, but it could be between twins, or it could be in some kind of karmic romantic situation as well. Something needs to be spoken that's triggered at that time. I also have written down here crown activations and throat activations happening at this time. Also, I've been feeling like, a wave of light, and I feel like a lot of that came already. I've been kind of really affected by the solar storms and the light activations last week. That's why I've been kind of quiet. But, that energy can be triggering something, or we might get, more solar flares and solar storms happening too in the next couple of weeks. So what I have written down about the convergence of those planets plus Vesta is that this is a turning point, and we're headed into unknown territory, right? If we're choosing to become the creators, then we're heading into something that has been unknown to us for eons of time. And with it, it's time for us to embrace our God self. Divine masculine have been waiting for us to change. We have to move out of the fear. And at this time and throughout this year, what we're really going to be working on is letting down the walls. Last year, we really delved into the subconscious to work on things that were holding us back. We're still doing that. There's still things coming up, programming that's connected to our karmic past that we're clearing, but we have cleared enough that we're ready, or we're getting ready to completely let our guard down. And that needs to happen to create a true union, to really be someone that can manifest things very rapidly, that all comes from the heart. So the guard has to come down. And so some of those triggers that we were experiencing might be that shift that brings your guard down, because it's time to move into unconditional love. It's time to open up the heart more than we ever have. Remember, right? Like I said, your twin flame is a reflection of you. And if your walls are up, then your twin has to have their walls up too, because they're just reflecting to you. You can choose to write your own story if you've disengaged from all the illusions of the 3D world. Manifestation has to come from source energy, or I should say manifestation happens more rapidly when we are in alignment with source energy. But especially if you're on the spiritual path, the things that you want to create are things that you desire because your higher self has put that desire within you. So I'm not going to say that you can't manifest through dark energy. Of course you can, but that's not what we're about. And so moving into this stage, it's all about alignment with source and with your higher self at this time. And another thing is we have to let go of timing. Time is a 3D concept, and one that really keeps us stuck, paralyzed in a lot of ways, because we have become so focused on time. But moving forward, that's one of the things that we'll have to work through. The Sabians of this new moon eclipse are telling us that it's harvest time. The sun and the moon are on the Sabian, a woman sprinkling rows of flowers. The North Node is on a jewelry shop filled with the most magnificent jewels, both of those having to do with manifestation and wealth. And then we have this really nice conjunction of Venus and Jupiter. And Venus and Jupiter are exact at the eclipse on, wow, look at that. They're like 1 minute apart, 2756 and 2757 Pisces. That is a tight conjunction. They're on the Sabian symbol of fertile garden under the full moon. So yeah, all of those are about manifesting. And that, you know, Neptune, Venus, Jupiter can certainly bring about heart activations, moving us into unconditional love. Venus, Jupiter also has a lot to do with abundance and wealth, and hopefully like us realizing that we can have anything that we set our mind to. And I feel like Venus and Jupiter here will definitely be, well, they are absolutely starting a new cycle. And it's an opportunity to start a new cycle of abundance and love, right? Because Jupiter expands what it touches. And, you know, I would say unity as well. So another thing that we have going on that I mentioned briefly is that asteroid Karma has just moved back into Scorpio. Karma's in retrograde, and it is going to be going over the South Node 2 more times in its retrograde. So Karma on the north, or on the South Node rather, which is our past, squaring Saturn and Union. We've got to let go. We got to let go of the old things, the old people, situations, stories. We got to step out of our comfort zone and really move off into that new territory that I talked about. And it's 222 here on the clock. It could be a lot of past life stuff coming up at this time too. Not really it's going to be more pertinent when we move into this Scorpio full moon eclipse, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So yeah, actually, I'm going to talk about it right now. So the Scorpio full moon eclipse is on May 16th. And this convergence is really tight and activated at the Scorpio full moon, because the full moon is at 25 degrees, Scorpio, Taurus. The nodes are at 22 degrees, Scorpio, Taurus. Karma is at 26 degrees, Scorpio. So it's right on top of the moon. And then Union, Saturn, and Vesta, well, Union and Saturn are both on 24, Vesta's on 27. So you can see that's all a very, very tight convergence of this energy. It's going to be a big activation. And, you know, speaking of like the storm or the bomb or something, some kind of unexpected event, right? I would say that's more likely to happen closer to the Scorpio full moon, but it doesn't have to be, because the energy is just like open and it's in play. So yeah, the sun is definitely still in orb of being in a conjunction with Uranus at this full moon. Now, another interesting thing here at the full moon eclipse is Chiron and Venus are in a really tight conjunction. It's probably going to be exact like the day before, 2 days before. So, you know, shortly after the solar eclipse, we'll probably start feeling Venus coming into a conjunction with Chiron, which again is going to bring up past life energy. And it usually brings up some kind of trigger, something that activates us, and if not, helps us break through our heart wall. It definitely brings up something that helps us see that we still have a wall up, and that if we really want to let love in, we have to let our guard down. Now, Chiron, remember, is our soul wound. So it represents that spot where we're sensitive, where we've been hurt, and where we hold on to that hurt. So, and again, it doesn't necessarily have to be with your twin, or it could be like it could be activating karmic relationships as well, because, you know, they're breaking down. Mars at that eclipse is conjunct Neptune, and it's like, I'm not going to continue with the illusion anymore. I'm willing to acknowledge the illusions. And Mars, Neptune are trine the South Node and the Moon and Karma all in that conjunction. So again, guys, it's like a wild card. Anything can happen. We've got Jupiter moving into Aries as well. So I'm not going to talk about that here. Maybe I'll do a separate video if I feel called to that. So speaking of karmic relationships, one of the interesting things that I've noticed this spring is that these karmic relationships and the breakdowns of karmic relationships are being thrust into the spotlight. And that's because we have two very public displays of people's marriages happening this spring. The first thing was Chris Rock being slapped by Will Smith over a comment he made about Jada Pinkett Smith. And so everybody had their eyes on Will Smith and Jada's marriage. And a lot of people didn't have very nice things to say about Jada Pinkett Smith. And then we have Johnny Depp and the Amber Heard defamation trial. And their private life is now being very publicly displayed. And what's especially interesting about those two scenarios is not only are they showing like this very public kind of breakdown of karmic relationships, and a lot of people don't like that term, karmic relationships, but some people really only do come together because they have karma to clear, and they're not meant to be a long-term connection. The interesting thing about those two scenarios is there's a lot of emphasis being put on how men can be abused. And a lot of the divine masculine that are still in karmic relationships are men. And some of them are experiencing these types of scenarios where their karmic partner is maybe a narcissist, for example, or what did Amber Heard? I haven't been following it that closely, but I saw a headline today on YouTube that Amber Heard was, I think, bipolar or something, or has personality disorder and some kind of histrionic disorder. So, you know, that we don't know about Jada Pinkett Smith. We don't know what her situation is. We can't judge her, can't just judge the other ones either, but it appears that maybe Amber Heard has some kind of mental illness. And so, yeah, it's interesting because she was the one that was claiming she was abused, but what's coming out is that she was more of the abuser. And again, we don't know what goes on in people's marriages, what's going on in Will and Jada's marriage, but it looks like Jada is, perhaps we could say, controlling. And again, we're just looking at our perspective. We don't know the whole truth, but I just want to point that out because it's interesting that these are being publicly shown. And now I am in no way saying that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are twin flames, or that Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith are twin flames. I don't believe that for 1 second. And I'm not saying that they are twin flames with someone else. They may be, they may not be, but I'm not discussing that at all, but just saying that those two marriages, by all appearances, are karmic relationships, and they're being put in the hot seat right now. They're garnering a lot of attention, and it's interesting that they're garnering a lot of sympathy for the men in that relationship. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have more of these types of scenarios become public as we move throughout this year. So I'm going to end this video here. Remember, this is part 1, and I'm going to be doing a part 2 where I talk about how this convergence is playing out for the rest of the year, because it will be in effect all the way through to the eclipses that we have in November. And Saturn and Union will be going retrograde together. So they are staying together fairly tightly all through this year. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that it resonated with you. If it did, leave me a comment. If you are a twin that met in 2012 or 2013, let me know in the comments, or let me know if any of those dates struck you as something that was very important for your connection. If you would like a personal reading with me, you can visit my website, twinstrology.com. If you want to sign up to be an affiliate of Intuit Oracle, there's a link below. Or if you're interested in my deck, the Twin Flame Intuit Oracle then there's a 10% coupon in my link tree that I'm posting below. Thank you guys so much, and I'll speak to you again soon. Namaste.